Another Founder Wisdom podcast with Ian Stafford, founder and owner of the Sporting Club. Ian is a very entertaining guest, to say the least, has a lot of experience and wisdom to share for working in the sporting business for quite a while. I've read his articles as a journalist. I've seen his stunts, which were quite interesting and which we might discuss about today. Ian's also an author of multiple books, which we might cover today. Ian, welcome to the pod. Tell us a bit more about yourself and your businesses.
Oh my goodness, Charles, how long have you got? Bonsoir, by the way. Bonsoir, Moni.
Bonsoir, Sam.
Yes, as you said, I've been a national and international sports writer for thousands of years, not just in the UK, but in North America as well, and indeed around the world. I've gone around the world. I've covered every single major sporting event there is to cover. I've interviewed probably 90% of the world's most famous sports stars since the mid-'80s, late '80s onwards. I've written 23 books. Some of them are participatory. So I've actually played alongside some of the greatest names and teams in the world. A little bit like George Plimpton did in the '60s in the States, but I've done it globally. An awful lot of television in the UK, a lot of radio. I've had various shows, radio shows, loads of TV appearances, and I'm also a event host. And I think my particular forte is interviewing. So I interview stars, and I tend to do them now on stage in front of live audiences. And I launched the Sporting Club 5 years ago. Literally day one, all my money pumped into it. No members, no events, nothing. Everybody asking me, "What are you doing? Yeah, have you gone mad?" It's a business club that began in London. We use the power of sport because sport is the world's greatest common denominator. It brings us all together. It doesn't judge you on your age or your sexuality or your religion or your background. If you're supporting the same boxer or the same football team or whatever it might be, you're together. So we launched in London. We then moved to Manchester as well. Lots of clubs where our business people hung out in. And I did loads of events with famous sports stars to entertain them, to entertain their clients. And we were growing nicely. And then, bang, COVID, which was difficult for the whole world. It wasn't obviously great for somebody who had all his venues shut down and all his events cancelled. But it is what it is. You know, that one of the great things about interviewing sports stars is that they go through the same crap as everybody does, but their successes and failures are magnified because they're in the public eye. I use sports stars because they tell their stories about they're on the floor, they're on the canvas. Do they stay there or do they get up? That's the choice we all have in life. So it wasn't ideal, shall we say, for all sorts of reasons. I think perspective is a really powerful tool. I use a lot of perspective in life. Every day you wake up, Charles, it's a good start. So we've come through that. We're growing again. We're doing loads of events, and I do loads of other people's events as well with some very, very big names. I've just secured Jack Nicklaus. I'm going to be doing a big Jack Nicklaus event early next year. I did a big Usain Bolt dinner, myself and Usain Bolt, 1 hour on stage, myself talking to Usain about his life and times. And it's a lot of fun, my friend. It's a lot of fun. You know, what's the famous saying from Confucius? If you enjoy your job, you never do a day's work in your life. And I'm very lucky, but I've also created a lot of my luck as well. So there we go. That's my whole life sorted, done. But the thing about me is yesterday is gone. It's all about today. It's all about tomorrow as well. But don't lose track of today. Make sure you enjoy today, because today is yesterday, tomorrow. It's gone. So make the most of today as well.
Yeah, time is this weird thing. I think we still do not fully understand it or perception of it, to say the least. My first question for you, Ian, is Ian. I have problems pronouncing Gian. We pronounce it that way in the US. Is
Ian.
Or it's like I am, but with an N. Ian, How do we interview someone like you that has so much data and possibly wisdom in their brain? Like you've done it with various athletes. Some athletes don't have much gray matter. Usain Bolt, it's another story because he's very entertaining. But I've interviewed athletes that sometimes, yeah, did not have, or let's say that extracting knowledge from them was harder. My
Mm.
question is, in your case, someone that is a great communicator that lived thousands of flabbergasting experience, which even words couldn't put the feeling behind them. How do you interview someone like you to extract the most knowledge?
I should be easy because I'm a natural talker. I have 1,000 stories, and you've just got to make sure I stay on piece and I stay on the subject matters that you want to discuss. Because otherwise, I'm away and over the horizon. You know, I
Yeah,
mean, I could literally talk for 2 hours and barely got started on my life because my life I consider myself incredibly lucky and incredibly wealthy. I'm very, very rich, but not necessarily financially. I've made some money, I've lost some money. Money's never driven me. I'm rich because of the stories I have to tell and the experiences and the anecdotes and the journey that I've taken and continue to take. I think that's why I'm so sort of positive and happy because I'm giving this thing called life the best shot I can.
right.
And I'm not done with it yet. I mean, I'm not as young as I used to be, but I'm not done. Nowhere near done.
You're not done. And for CEOs listening, who was, let's start with this, who was the athlete that shared the best knowledge, and it's possibly an athlete hybrid business person. There's some of that, and it's funny because CEOs want to be athletes, athletes want to be CEOs. What athlete have you talked with that shared the most value when it comes to being a CEO or a founder or an entrepreneur?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't answer that by naming one person. What I will say is that when you listen to the very, very best sports stuff, what differentiates the winners from the winners? What makes winners out of winners? It's a given they all have a skill set, like we all do. We're all good at something. They have a skill set. But the best, the real champions, it's all about the mindset. It's all about the top 6 inches in the head. Every single great champion is great because of their mentality, their fight, their perseverance, their determination, their refusal to accept defeat. Now, those attributes are exactly what you and I and CEOs need to have as well as core ingredients. When you speak to people who are successful in teams, then of course you then bring into the conversation teamwork about you're only as good as the person next to you, that you're not playing or performing or growing a business for yourself, you're also doing it for the person next to you. And so when you speak to captains of teams, you know, they could easily be captains of industry, that the skill set is transferable, very transferable. And that's why I like to speak to sports stars in front of business people, because I'm not sort of anal about how did you score that goal or that touchdown, or, you know, how did you fire that puck into the ice hockey net. I just said that for you because you're Canadian. I'm not hugely interested in that. I'm interested in the human being. Most human beings are fascinating people. I'm talking about everyday life because we're all sharing a journey and the ups and downs of life. Sports stars are particularly because they faced enormous pressure, enormous challenges that they either clear or they don't. But it's magnified in the public eye. And so whenever I interview sports stars or anybody for that matter, I'm interested in what makes them tick. What is it that makes them succeed? And you know, when because I've known so many sports stars for so many years, they completely open up to me. And they talk about. I mean, I've had famous sports stars break down in tears. I had Sugar Ray Leonard came over last summer. I did 6 dinners with Sugar Ray Leonard, and Ray broke down in tears, telling the story of how classic North American, well, really boxing story, but particularly American boxing story. Father was a waste of space, absolute waste of space. Mother had 4, 5, you know, real sort of low level jobs, which she'd do a day, 4, 5 jobs. They're cleaning here, doing this, doing that, just to keep the family going. And Ray won an Olympic gold medal. He became a professional, and of course, he went on famously to beat Hagler, Hearns, Duran, and many others as well. But the greatest moment in his life was just after his second ever professional fight, which of course nobody cares about. Nobody could even name who the second fight was, because it would have been 6 rounds, really unimportant. But it's the biggest moment of Ray's life, because Ray asked his mother to come to a certain address. So she jumped out of a taxi, and Ray was holding the keys to the first house her mother would ever own herself. And when he told that story, he broke down in tears. And when you see a sports star like that, rather than interviewed on TV with a microphone put in front of their face, and they're sort of giving sound bites, when you get them to really open up, that's when they are at their most fascinating. And that's happened quite a few times with me over the years, which I don't want to sound as if I like making grown men cry, but there is a part of me that does, because then I know it's working. Then I know that they're not performing anymore for the audience. They're actually just talking to me and you, talking like two friends by a crackling fire in a bar.
And is it, how do you get someone to open up like this on a public platform? Is it by having them forget that they're actually in an interview and having them imagine what it was, so that they can become this open book?
Well, listen, the trick is, I always say, turn an interview very, very quickly into a fireside chat. There's a big difference. It's not question, answer, question, answer. It helps because most of these people know me. I've been around a long time. They know they're in safe hands. They know they can trust me. They know I'm not trying to catch them out. And then the art is to take them by the hand and gently lead them to slightly darker, deeper parts of their lives, as we've all had, Charles. We've all had dark, deep elements in our life. That's part of the journey. But they've got to feel comfortable and at ease talking about it. And that's my job, to make sure that they are. It's spellbinding when it happens. I'll tell you another story. It may not mean so much in North America, but there was a really, really famous rugby player called Jonah Lomu, who was from New Zealand, but he was a big, massive Polynesian guy. He was the first superstar in the sport of rugby union. And he was so big, he used to just run through, run round, run over stars. He was massive, massive in physique and massive in terms of his stature in the game. And I got to know him well. He had major kidney problems, major kidney troubles, and he kept defeating the illnesses and coming back and playing. And I used to know him quite well. And I remember interviewing him on stage in London on the Friday night before the 2015 Rugby World Cup final. And it was great. And he did a haka on stage, and everybody loved it. And the New Zealand Prime Minister was there. And right at the end, I said to him, "Is there anything else you want to achieve in life?" And he broke down in tears. And he pointed. And in front of him was, on the top table, his two boys, who at the time were like 6 and 8 years old. And he said, and he cried for about 10, 12 seconds. When that happens, by the way, you can't dive in. You've got to give them space, but you can't let it go on forever, because it starts getting a little bit awkward. So the challenge is to get them out of that mindset somehow. So I said something a little bit funny that made him kind of laugh through his tears. And then he calmed down and he said, yeah, he pointed at the boys and he said, "I just want to live long enough to see them become men." 2 weeks later, he died.
Holy fuck.
Yeah. So
from what?
Well, from the kidney disorder he had. The kidney disorder. He died.
Okay, so he knew he had this disorder, and
he knew he was in trouble. I don't think he thought he was going to die in the next 2 weeks. But he that's why he said, I want to live long enough to see my boys become men. Yeah.
What a dramatic story.
I think about that quite a lot, actually, thinking about it. He was a nice man as well. So anyway, the point is that it's very sad, but then that's life. Life can be sad.
And brutal.
Yes, it is. And you've just got to, what did Churchill say? Churchill said, when you're going through hell, keep going. And so when the times are good, enjoy them. When the times are bad, knuckle down, head down, get through them.
I agree
And,
with
and
that.
you and you will. What do they always say? The sun always shines after the darkest night.
Yeah. Yeah, or
Yeah,
the rainbow and the sunshine after the storm. Yeah,
correct.
I talk a lot about Stoic philosophy nowadays, and yeah, that's a pretty striking one. But yeah, pretty sure that these young boys had and still have their father into their hearts. You know, the warrior spirit and so forth.
Yeah, yeah.
People never really die. You know.
Yeah.
I want to talk about like participatory articles that you did, or your
Yeah.
physical presence and living the experience as a journalist, which must have been pretty innovative at the time. Um, you wrestled with this big guy called Pat Roach. Maybe start with that one. And what did you learn from that experience and that big guy
Okay. Can I
behind
actually?
you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There he is.
There he
There he is.
is as a
And
man.
also, those are my lanyards from various events. My daughter found them in a bag, and Father's Day last year, uh, she and her boyfriend presented that to me because they said, "Oh, you don't
Nice.
want to live in the past." I don't really live in the past. I try not to live in the past. I try and live in the present. But I
Yeah.
have to say, when I look at those lanyards, every lanyard has a story. You know, Olympic Games, World Cups, World
Wow.
title fights. They've all got a story. Um,
Yeah.
so what happened was if I could just go back a little bit, I had this idea. I was the premise was I was very good at sport at a public level. I was in the school team and everything. Over in the UK, you know, you have states or provinces. We have counties. I played county 4-5 sports, and I wanted to represent the person, and there were millions of them who drink their beer, their feet up, watching the TV, saying, "Hey, how did he drop that, miss that, do that? I would have done it." So I wanted to put that to the test, and at the same time also tell the sports stars stories. So the first book was called Playgrounds of the Gods, where I went around the world playing sport with or against some really, really famous but interesting people as well, because I also wanted to make it socio-political, socio-geographical. I wanted to show the power of sport. It wasn't just about me playing with these people. I wanted to tell their stories, using me as a conduit. So I went to Brazil and played football with Flamengo, who are the biggest football team in Brazil, where, you know, the favelas, they're in Rio de Janeiro. You can see the favelas, you know, the you know, have the closeness of the rich and the poor was so clear in Rio. But yet the beach is free, the sea is free, the sun is free, and you go to Copacabana Beach and there's hundreds and hundreds of football pitches and kids playing football. I went to Pakistan and played squash against the then world champion. Similar story. How do we escape this poverty? Oh, let's go and play squash because we're very good at playing squash. I ran with the Kenyans in the steeplechase in the Rift Valley, 9,000 feet. I came last. I've got to tell you a story about this. Have we got time for a story about this? I'll tell you in a
Yeah.
second. I'll tell you in a
Yeah.
second. I did all these crazy things, but the craziest thing of all, before we get on to the wrestling, was I spent 6 months learning to box in a London gym. I know boxing gyms are rough, but everybody leaves their egos outside, and then you go in, and they were great. They looked after me. They taught me how to box. I spent 6 months learning to box, whilst doing all these other sports. And then I went to Pensacola, Florida. I did 3 rounds against Roy Jones Jr., who at the time was the best pound for pound boxer in the world. Now, look, I'm not going to make out to you or the listeners that he was 100% full on. In fact, he was 3 weeks away from defending his world title against Otis Grant, who I believe was Canadian, 3 weeks away. But he got in the ring with me, and his cornerman said he was on about 70%. It was horrific. I mean, I know this sounds odd. He just kept punching me. Well, yeah, go figure. He's a boxer. But honestly, I just wasn't prepared for it at all. The first time he hit me, it was like somebody slabbing a big slab of concrete, bang, in my face. And he thought it was 1 round, not 3. So he therefore just started laying into me. And at the end of the first round, he came over and said, "You got guts, my friend. You got the heart of a lion. I enjoyed that." I said, "Ray, it's 3 rounds. Roy, it's 3 rounds, not one." So he went back to his corner. And as he went back, I thought, what am I doing? Why did I say that? I remember the second round, I saw blood all over his vest. And I remember thinking, I've cut Roy Jones. And at the same time, I was also thinking, what's all that liquid in my mouth? And it was my own blood dribbling down my vest. It was absolutely horrific. Anyway, that was the pièce de résistance, the climax of that book. It went nuts, sold over 1 million copies. I was the back page interview in Newsweek. Sports Illustrated did some stuff. And yeah, it won me a literary award as well in the UK. So then I did a follow-up book, which was a UK version of it. And one of the chapters was learning to wrestle, old school UK wrestling, not sort of WWE. Back in the 70s and the 80s, you got these huge over-the-hill nightclub bouncers with stupid names like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks and names like that. And you had all these sort of old grannies with their handbags in the front row, leaning over the ropes and trying to hit the baddie, because you had goodies and baddies. So Pat Roach, if you don't know who Pat Roach is, he was a wrestler, but he was also in a very famous television show called Auf Wiedersehen, Pet. But what he's best known for in terms of American listeners and viewers to your podcast was that in the first Indiana Jones film, Indy had a fight with a massive bald guy on the wing of the plane, and the bald guy, ended up being chopped to bits by the propeller. That was my man, Pat Roach. So he taught me to wrestle, and then he and I took on 2 guys called Dick the Bruiser and Pretty Boy Stewart. Pretty Boy Stewart was totally bald, but he had a big ponytail at the back. And they were like nightclub bouncers. They were slightly over the hill, but they were as hard as nails. And they basically beat the crap out of me. And then and it was tag team. And then Pat came in and beat the crap out of them. So we won. Yeah, there were films of it, and it went absolutely everywhere. And people say, "Oh, it's just for show. It's pantomime." My abdomen the next morning was purple with bruising. Trust me. Or the only way it's pantomime is that when you're going to fall, when they flip you, you sometimes accentuate it to make sure you land safely on your back, not your neck. So that was that. Sorry, can I just tell you this story? Because I've got to tell you this story.
We've got like 10 minutes more, by the way.
Well, really quickly. In the first book, when I ran in the Kenyans, at the end of 15,000 Kenyans there, and I came, I like to say 8th. You may say last. And the 7 others were Kenyans, and they finished with 2 laps. I had 2 laps by myself. So I'm running around 15,000 local, predominantly Swahili. They're all laughing, they're all shouting Muzungo, which is a white guy. And I'm punching the air and they're laughing, and it's all fine. And at the end, Kip Keino came up to me. Kip Keino is the godfather of African long distance running, won Olympic gold in 68-72, opened the door for African athletics now, Ethiopians, Kenyans, they win everything, or they get American citizenship and win everything. But anyway, he said, "Come and see me the next day." So I went to see him the next day. He had an orphanage, and he sat down and he said, "I want to give you this. And this is an African water gourd. It's got some multicolored beading on it and a leather strap. You can go down to an African street market. It's worth $3. Buy it for $3. But Kip Keino gave me this. And I said, "Why are you giving me this?" He said, "This is from me to you, because for 2 reasons. Number one, you entertain me. You made me laugh." And I said, "Well, I wasn't trying to make you laugh." He goes, "I know, but you entertain me. And you entertained 15,000 people. You brought joy to 15,000 people." He said, "But the other reason is," he said, "you finished. And I admire that you finished." He said, "You weren't very good compared to the others, but you finished. You didn't give up. So this, my friend, is for you." Now, this is worth nothing. It's worth $3. But to me, it's worth everything. And we're talking about it's not about the price, it's about the value.
Yeah.
And that's why I still have it. And if there was a fire in my house, I'd run in and I'd save it. And that's just one of 1,000 stories I have over the years.
Fascinating. Yeah, the first comment is it's always funny, like the people that comment from the back of their screens, right? Watching the game, he didn't do the pass right, he didn't shoot it right. They think they think that it's doable, but they forget that elite level athletes, they're incredibly good and probably 3 to 10 to 15 times better than you are. They made the sacrifices too. It's funny, when I entered endurance sports, Ironman's was like, yeah, I'm gonna finish first, and and enter the event. When you do the actual work and your body understands the pain and so forth, you quickly know that this is it's near impossible. You need to dedicate your whole life, your whole soul to it. You've spoken with like top level athletes also on your end. I want to talk about another sport that is fascinating to me, and it's quite unconventional. I want to talk about racing. Michael Schumacher, he was an amazing driver, broke his neck while skiing. I watched his career, followed his career, and all of that. Like, what was your experience with these guys racing against them?
Yeah, I read a book called "Who Do You Think You Are, Michael Schumacher," which is what my wife said one day when she thought I was speeding, and I thought that's a great title for a book, especially as I'd already written 3 participatory books. The one before had been all about golf. I called it "In Search of the Tiger," and that was in search of not just Tiger Woods, but the tiger inside yourself. Your own hole in one. It doesn't have to be Tiger Woods; it can be you, because in golf, as you know, you can be world class for one shot. So that worked well. And that's when I hung out with Jack Nicklaus and got to meet Tiger and everything else. So the follow-up was a Formula One book, or actually a motorsport book. And I went around the world. I met some of the great drivers of the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, the ones who were lucky to live, because they used to race with no seatbelts. And I mean, it was horrific, the amount of deaths and horrible deaths that took place in motorsport. So I hung out and got to know so many of the great drivers. Some of them who I was with are now no longer with us. Niki Lauda, for example, the great Niki Lauda, he flew me in his own charter plane from Vienna to Rome and back again, with me sitting in the cockpit with him, whilst everybody else was just, eating their plane food and going to Italy. But Michael Schumacher, classic example about the top 6 inches. I got to know him quite well, and his perception was hard-nosed German, and particularly in the UK, it's a lazy perception to have, because the history of England and Germany, and cold, no humor, and relentless. Not even the most talented, but relentless. A lot of drivers will tell you, even though statistically he's nowhere near the greatest, but a lot of drivers say Ayrton Senna was still the greatest. But if you got to know Schumacher, he actually had a very dry sense of humor, quite self-deprecating as well. I remember once he turned up for an interview with me and he was late, so he fined himself for being late, which I thought was quite a nice touch. I remember another time when I had to write for Esquire magazine, and I turned up in, I think it was Jerez in Spain, and he had one of these incredible Maserati Spider sports cars, and he was to drive me around the track. And he was told all the things I did, because although he knew me a bit, he didn't know me that well. But he told me I did all these things: climb Kilimanjaro, trek to the North Pole, run with the bulls in Pamplona, Presta Run, the world's most dangerous toboggan. So I remember strapping him next to him, and he goes, "Oh," he said, "you think you're a tough guy?" Which is the first thing he said. I went, "Well, Michael, I wouldn't say that." But he goes, "But nothing scares you." And what are you going to say? So I said, "No, not really." He goes, "We'll see." And then he, and off he goes. He's driving one-handed. He's putting the radio on whilst he's going around corners. And I can feel the nausea growing in me, but I refused to. I thought, oh my God, I can't throw up all over Michael Schumacher. And when it finished, he gave me a hug and he said, "You're a tough guy," which was really, really nice. And then the final Michael story and the end of the book was this. there's a thing called the Race of Champions, where you get all the motorsports together and they race against each other, normally in a big stadium. And this particular year was in Paris at the incredible Stade de France, 80, 90,000 people. And he had F1 drivers, IndyCar drivers, sports car drivers, rally drivers, and they're all having these various challenges. And I was allowed to have a head-to-head against Michael in this car. It was a time trial. So he went first, and then about 15 minutes later, I went in front of 80,000 people. But in between those two times, it rained. All right. So I finished, and I was 15 seconds behind him doing this sort of lap. It wasn't just a straight lap. It was, weaving and going over things and under things. And he came up to me and he's going, I win. This is the 8-time world Formula One champion. I win. And I said, well, Michael, it did rain. So I reckon if I calculate, without the rain, I would have beaten you by 1 second. I mean, I'm saying it as a joke. He goes, no. Nobody cares. It rained. He says, all it says in the record books, my friend, is that I won. And I looked at him and I said, of course, because that's the machine you are.
That's funny.
And so I'm very sad, very sad. I mean, it's dreadfully tragic. All those races, all that danger, and he's in a coma and has been for many years.
Yeah, very adrenaline seeking, right? Like, is that the result of too much adrenaline seeking? Is that like not knowing your limits, always pushing or is it just a freak accident?
The answer is yes and yes. I mean, the actual accident, he wasn't going particularly fast. It was a freak accident. It was an example that in life, life can change instantly and irrevocably, and there's nothing you can do about it except just crack on and make the most of your life and seize the opportunity, because you never know what's around the corner. That doesn't mean, therefore, tread on eggshells in your life because scared of what's going to happen. What happens, happens. You can only control the controllables in life.
Yeah, he seemed like a family man. And when you said the German machine, I think another top athlete that got that perception was Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? That's how they tried to brand him. Did you follow his career?
Schwarzenegger, well, he was Austrian, wasn't he? Well, not as a bodybuilder, because bodybuilding wasn't particularly big in the UK. But obviously, as an actor, I have. But I mean, that's a very single-minded individual. For him to achieve, I mean, people can laugh or say what they want about, hasta la vista, baby. He's not Robert De Niro, is he? Let's be honest. But what does he care? To be the bodybuilding champion of the world, to then have an incredible and highly lucrative movie career, to then become governor of California, and to become a very well-respected political figure as well.
Right, incredible career.
Fair play. I look. Everybody who knows me knows I'm a very positive person. I don't know why I am. I just am. So I like success stories. Sometimes it's a human trait where people don't like seeing other people do well. I think fantastic. How does it affect me negatively if somebody does well? And if Arnold Schwarzenegger has done what he's done, that's brilliant. He's another one who's seized life and taken every opportunity.
Right. If you're a crab in the bucket, it's the other way around. It's like pulling people down when they have success. If you're an eagle, you'll certainly enjoy seeing other successful people. You'll model them and so forth. So yeah, it's all about your mindset. I'm also interested in hearing from you from trekking, for example, and expeditions, because the UK history is quite rich for that. My favorite book and probably my favorite quote unquote athlete is Sir Ernest Shackleton. What was your experience with that and the crazy UK explorers that discovered so much?
And George Mallory.
I don't know George. I need to Google him.
So George Mallory, okay, and here's the thing. We'll never know, okay? 1924, I think, in tweeds, okay? Tweeds, climbed Everest. And he disappeared until very recently, where they found his body, back sticking out of the snow. And although people say he probably didn't make it. He was last photographed pretty close to the summit in 1924, just wearing tweeds. It's one of those sort of typical sort of British former army sort of figures. Very upper class, very posh, but hard as nails. And so I love the fact there's still a slight mystery about it. Did he or didn't he make it? I'd like to think he did, because he he was completely not dressed. At the time he was dressed, that's what they wore. But to climb Everest, and of course, it wasn't until 1953 that Edmund Hillary did it. So I'm really into that sort of, all that sort of stuff, you know. John Krakauer and all that stuff. I wrote the autobiography of a man called David Hempelman Adams, who climbed the seven summits of the highest mountain in each of the world's 7 continents. That includes Everest, but it also includes, Aconcagua in South America, and Denali in Alaska, and Kilimanjaro, which I climbed as well. By the way, so one of my life highlights was climbing Kilimanjaro.
Wow.
That was to
How
see
was
the
that?
sun. Oh, to see. Well, I did the 5-day route. That's the hardest, toughest route. It's not because I'm a tough guy. It's because I was busy. So from door to door, leaving England to returning to England was 9 days. I didn't do it to prove a point. I did it because my time was short. But because of that, it was only 5 days. You had less. You had to walk more, and you had less time to acclimatize. I was in a group of 28 people. Only 14 people made it. And anybody who goes, oh, Kilimanjaro, everybody does that. No, everybody tries that. And as a result, a lot of people make it. But if anybody ever says to you, oh, that's easy, they're lying. I've known many
Freaking hard,
professional
man.
I've known many professional sports people who will tell you it's the hardest thing they've ever done. And as you well know, Charles, there's fitness, but there's different forms of fitness. You can be very fit at swimming and you can barely run a mile. So there's different forms of fitness. But that really does. And when you get up at midnight and you're 18,000 feet, so you're 4,000 meters, and no, you're not, you're 6,000 meters, and it's -20, and you put your torch on and you start climbing up, and it's scree and shale. So you're walking up and then he's sliding down, and it saps your energy after sort of 5 long days. That's where you're challenged mentally as well. But I was raising a lot of money for charities, which was a good thing for me to do. A, because it's good to raise money for charity, but actually B, selfishly, it meant I had no option. I had no option. I couldn't go back and tell these paraplegic people, sorry, I got tired. So it kind of drove me to the top. Yeah. So I'm really into that sort of thing. And this guy, David Hempelman Adams, whose book I wrote, I once trekked to the North Pole with him, just him and me. I mean, we didn't go the whole way. We got drops, and I did 5 days with him. Classic, put in the sledge to the North Pole. Now I'm from London, okay. So every night we get in the tent. Stars were so big, I felt I could almost grab one. They looked so close. And we had a couple of huskies, which we never used to pull anything. And I said to him, "Why have we got huskies when we're not using them?" He said, "Well," he said, "Yeah," he said, because they'll smell the polar bear and they'll start making a noise. And secondly, if we get attacked by polar bears, they'll go for the huskies first." And I was sort of going, "Oh my, oh what? What are you talking about?" And he said, "This is why I've got a gun." So at night he'd fall asleep like a baby because he was in his natural environment. I'm a guy from London. I'm hearing the first ow, and I'm getting the gun and I'm sticking it out the tent, thinking, no, please, 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 please. I don't want to shoot a polar bear, but then again, I don't want to get eaten by a polar bear either. So that was an experience. And I'll tell you a psychological story here. How about this for mindset? Because he walked to the North Pole, the South Pole. He climbed the 7 summits. He did the magnetic North Pole, the magnetic South Pole. He's done it all. And all solo, by the way, as well, with no help. So when he walked to the South Pole, he had with him something like a 600-page paperback of the autobiography of Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister for many years in the UK. And when he finished reading, he was so tired every night, he'd read 6 pages of a paperback, and then he would rip the pages out and bury them in the snow, and in the morning get going again. Why did he do that? because his mind was telling him, because he's taken 6 pages out the book, it's going to be easier today because the sledge is lighter.
Wow.
6 pages of a paperback. But for him,
What a hack.
it's not going to be as bad today because the sledge is lighter. And that's the power of mindset, isn't it?
Yeah, no better way than to finish this interview off. Like, wow, okay, mind blown. You have told various stories, and yes, very wealthy is Mr. Ian. Ian, you've lived a hell of a life, to say the least, and also that's very much part of the life and the definition of the life that I intend to live. So thank you so much for that today. Lots of lessons in, and that last one, it will sink in like slowly but surely. It's deep. I love it, and I think I'm gonna use the same hack for my next mountain or my next expedition and so forth. So thank you so much, Ian. Where can people find out more about you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, of course. You can't miss these beautiful features on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter at Ian Staffs. I'm on TikTok, which is fast growing. And let's see, LinkedIn, TikTok. I'm on Instagram. You can't miss me there either. So I'm all over the platforms, and that's a good place to see me. I also, if you Google ianstaffordmedia.com, you'll see all my books and some news about me and what I do there as well. So there we go. You can't escape me, people. Sorry.